Welcome back to the Kirk Miller Podcast. Today I have a man I consider now a fantastic friend and someone who spoke at our Built to Last event in November, wasn't it, Paul? And he was someone that when I was back in the UK, I just desperately wanted to get on this podcast, mate. So please welcome to the podcast, Paul Cheetham-Karcz. I still can't say it. No. He's become one of my good friends. I still can't say your name
Just
properly.
say Paul Cheetham.
Paul Cheetham. The man's a legend, and the reason I wanted to get him on, and this might be a reoccurring theme with some of the recent guests we've had on, but I think Paul, above any, if I'm honest, typifies what I consider someone to be a very humble, genuine high performer. Because a lot of people can be high performing, Paul, I'm sure you've come across these people in business. They've got the money, they've got the status.
Yeah.
Some people can just forget where they've come from. And Paul, am I right in saying, Paul, you're a council estate kid?
Yeah, well, so I grew up in in a broken home. That was fixed, by the way. I must always say this. Like my dad in my life, who came into our life when I was 5, created real love, security and stability. So from the age of 5, I had what you would class as a working class upbringing. But I can remember prior to that, which was, I mean, you know, there was me, my sister and my mum. And my mum used to boil a pan of potato ash on a Sunday night. And that was what we ate. That was the only thing we had to eat, like 7 days a week.
What's it called?
It's called potato ash. It's like a stew.
What is it?
It's like a stew. I mean, you wouldn't catch me anywhere near one ever again, because I had it every day from like the age of 18 months till I was 5. Every day for dinner was just another bowl of it, right? So I've never had it since. But there's a period of life that I remember quite vividly, really, of having nothing.
Yeah.
And then I had a working class upbringing after that. And my dad was a lorry driver, you know, he brought me up, and my mum was worked at B&Q, and they led lives that at least at that point was secure and stable, let's say, and lots of love in our house, no issue with that from the age of 5. But I just felt like there was more to life, even as a kid. They would say things, my mum and dad, and even today, they still say things to me like, when are you going to slow down?
They're still here, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll say things like, when are you going to slow down? They'll kind of give me those social cues, almost, and of course it's subconscious in their case, but the social cues for me to not, what's the word? Not go outside of my box, to stay in my comfort zone, to stay in my lane. I think society's pretty big at stuff like this, even people who love you. So they would see, like, I remember once a car coming on our house, on our street, and it was an old Toyota. You know, it wasn't a Porsche, a Ferrari. It was a Toyota, mate. Right. So that was on our street, and I remember my dad looking at it as if, like, you know, a Ferrari's just landed there, and I remember thinking, I'll have one of those, and I would say I thought differently. I don't think it's better, but I thought differently than all the kids around me, particularly when I seen that as I got older, when I got to like 15 and 16, when they were all making decisions about let's get a job for life, which let's be honest, the education system and the social system we was in was forcing them, pushing and nudging them gently into it. I was just more rebellious than that. So I spent a lot of time with my granddad, coming back to your question, and he lived like 80s kids did. Both my grandparents lived on the same council estate, and I grew up a lot around there and learned a lot, if I'm honest with you, about work ethic, streetwise decision-making. You know, you give a single woman 100 quid or 50 quid or whatever it is they get on benefits, and they'll make that last across 1 kid or 3. They'll know how to spend money. Do you know what I mean? There's a misconception that, you know, like when they go, oh, people on benefits, you watch a single woman on benefits, how far she'll make 100 quid stretch. Do you know what I mean? So I think there's a lot of learnings, and I'm glad of my upbringing, but it was certainly a world away from the kind of lifestyle, not lifestyle, but the kind of lifestyle will make it seem like tangible rewards are important to me, and you'll find out in a bit they're not really important to me or anyone else. They don't fulfill you. We'll come on to that a little bit later. But yeah, so that was my upbringing, mate. Very working class, much worse than that at the start, and I remember it vividly. Lack of stability, lack of security, and so on. But it got corrected, thankfully, when I was 5. And then
when you say lack of
working
stability
class.
and what do you mean exactly?
You've got no protector. You know, I could go really deep. I'm always careful, really, of what I say. I'd love to say it, really, but I've got to be respectful of my mum, you know, who's a wonderful mum. But she was a single mum trying to bring up 2 kids on her own in the early 80s. You know, choice of boyfriends weren't great, so we had to put up with a bit of that. You can probably imagine, again, early 80s, males, big drinking culture. So it was just, and we had no money. I mean, we had nothing, you know, we had nothing. And I knew we had nothing, you know, which is why I try and put back as much as I can. Now I was on school dinners, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with all that. But what I could tell you is there was a big difference when a male role model come into my life, my dad, and he was a man's man. And he provided love, and he provided stability and security. Security, I felt safe. I didn't feel safe for the first few years of my life that I can remember. And it was volatile. And then all of a sudden he come in and gave me mum what she deserved, really. And we was able to then build a working class lifestyle, which was great. But my mum and dad never thought really much outside the box of going to the local working men's club for a pint. You know, that was their treat. An Indian takeaway on a Friday night and a couple of beers. That was a treat. You know, that's what they worked for them rewards. And I just, I wanted more than that. And they never pushed me. It was just something that came from within. But I do think the first year 2, I remember my second birthday. I won't go into it, but I remember my second birthday because it was such an incident. And from year 2 to 5, I think that shaped who I was going to be. And I wasn't sticking around in that kind of environment.
So would you say, again, you don't need to go into granular details, Paul, but obviously something's happened at 2. Would you say that was your toughest moment as a kid?
As a kid, you're resilient. Your kids are resilient.
You don't know any different.
You don't know any different. So it doesn't affect you, but I do think it affects you in later life. Rejection issues, validation, vulnerability, insecurity, right? So I don't think as a kid you know any different, right? You're just so resilient, aren't you? You bounce back from anything as a kid.
It's just the norm, isn't it?
But you've been programmed.
Yeah.
This is the big thing that I've realised as I had what some people might deem success later in life. I realised it was built on fragility. And there was a point in time when I'd not realised that. And I think some of the people you alluded to, you know, the flash fuckers who think they've got, you know, they buy a car and they put it on social media for validation. I'm not judgmental because I get it, but I understand it. I know why you've put your car on social media. You don't look good, right? You don't look good to me. You don't look good to most people, if I'm honest with you. It really, you're putting it on because you've not fixed the issues you had as a kid. That, by the way, have driven you and fueled you to the success you've got. So they are a superpower, but they also can bring you down pretty quickly, right? The kind of, that kind of drive that we all have to be in that top 0.1%. It comes at a consequence. I think as we get older, the sooner we can learn to be self-aware of why we're driven, and then give ourselves almost a bit of self-love to accept why we're driven and accept our flaws, the better. Because if not, that obsession with building a business or looking brilliant or whatever it is we're obsessed with, it's driven usually by something a bit more negative than that. And if you don't deal with that as an adult, it can spill out. It can spill out. Well, it often does. And I often see lots of financially successful people failing as human beings.
On that note, because obviously some people might be thinking, what gives you the right to say that so many financially successful people are failing as human beings? Can you tell people a bit more about Sir Julia Group, the business, and what you do, who you work with?
Yeah.
Because I think this podcast might veer off in multiple different directions, but there's nothing that's not going to be explained by the end of this podcast. But for those who don't know what you do, the company you have, tell people about that.
So the gaps was, I wanted to be I was the first person in my family to go to higher education, right? No, not hardly anyone from my school went into higher education.
Well, when did you decide that you wanted to go to higher education?
I just decided, I tell you when I decided, when I got sent to a car mechanics garage on my work experience.
What age was that?
15. And I got there and I was looking forward to, I was in my steel toe cap boots and they're in my overalls. And I sat there and it was the best life experience I ever could have had. Because for that 2 weeks that I went there, mate, and my school sent me there to go and get a job for life. That was the objective of the 2 weeks. Work experience, go and get a job. And it's a stable garage. So you'll get a job for life here at this garage. And literally by the end of the day, I'd gone in all full of guns and positivity and let's, showcase your skills or whatever it might have been, see if you can get a job. By the end of it, I thought, there is no fucking way on this planet I'm doing that for the rest of my life. And I don't mean the activity of being a mechanic. Yeah. I mean the environment that they worked in. The countdown. So it's 9 o'clock, we get in. Mm-hmm. And really the countdown is till 10:30 till they had the bacon sandwiches. They come back from that and they count down to lunch, and they count down after lunch was to the break. And then at 4:59, they're all stood around the clocking out machine and they're out there like a bat out of hell. Right? They can't wait to see through that day. And the next day, and the next day, and the week, and the following week. And I remember thinking, there's got to be more to life than this. There has to be more to life than counting it down. Wasting days away to the weekend. And by the way, when you asked them on a Monday what they'd done at a weekend, the highlight was an Indian takeaway on a Friday night. And I just thought, how can you count down 5 or 6? It's a waste of a life. And I knew that at 15, so I thought, I'm not doing that, but I don't know what I'm going to do. I went on and did some higher education. Didn't fit in there because I was a, bald-headed, sovereign, ring-wearing, Rockport boots, Burberry, polo with collars up.
Everyone had them.
Sovereigns, as I say, gold chains, anything to really try and have an identity as not being poor, probably, right? If I look back now. And I went to a college where I just didn't fit in. I didn't fit in. And I went to uni. I don't think I fitted in there either.
Why?
I just felt like... I felt like a scally, like me, as I was at the time. Just didn't fit in. I didn't know anybody who was at uni. Had one friend. And his dad was a teacher. He seemed to gel in there. He had friends. I just felt lost there. But it was what it was, right? I'm not bothered. Not saying I enjoyed uni life at all. I didn't get on with them. It was a means to an end for me. Get a degree, then what? Be a teacher. And then they handed me the teacher sort of pay scale. And I thought, there's another framework that diminishes your opportunity. Doesn't matter how good you are, you're on that. And the second year, don't matter how good or bad you are, you're on this. That's not for me. So we'll take our chances. I'm a risk taker. Ended up becoming an accountant, which is an odd profession for a risk taker. But it gave me 3 years extra studying after uni, which I felt like I needed a framework, right? I needed to sit within something.
Why accountancy?
Just the job that I got. It was like, I need a job that gives me further education beyond the degree that I don't know what I want to do. And I know I want to earn some decent money back then. So I ended up as being an accountant. And what I did realise was relatively quickly, and as I've got older in life, I still have imposter syndrome, but I'm able to recognise more in my sort of mid-40s what I'm good at. I realised I worked harder than everybody else. Okay. End of story. Just is what it is.
When you say you worked hard, what were you doing that other people weren't? Because it could be quite a broad term. I work hard. Like what?
I was in internal audit, right? My first job. And you're checking up on businesses and you have to write a report at the end of it. And I remember handing my report in at the end of the day. And my boss said, oh no, there's 10 of you here and we've got to do 10 reports this week. So we'd give you one. And I said, well, it only took me a day. By the way, I'd stayed there till 8, 9 o'clock at night because I thought, I'm nearly finished the report. Might as well finish it. Job finished. So he said, I'll give you another one on the Tuesday. So he gave me another one. So I did another one same day. And on the Wednesday morning when I spoke to him, he said, you need to slow down. I said, why? He said, nobody else has handed in a report yet. And I said, well, why is that? It only takes a day. He said, I know, but we've got a week to do every report. You're starting to annoy people. So I started to think, well, probably not a place for me, this, if they're telling me to slow down. I mean, I actually did 3 years there in the end. I went around doing all these different jobs, but I just knew I developed a passion. And my passion is helping people on the journey. Accountancy facilitates that because it gets you in with whoever you speak. You need an accountant.
Correct.
Put me into whoever you're meeting in this afternoon. He or she needs an accountant.
Correct.
Your missus needs an accountant. The heavyweight champion of the world needs an accountant. I started to realise, fuck, this is pretty lucky. I can be in a room with anybody and they need me. That means I can be part of their journey. And if I play it strategically well, I can pick and choose what journeys I'm part of. What I also realised was most people are not passionate when they're accountants. Slightly different today, but back then, 20 odd years ago, if you was well-to-do, mum and dad would say, you need a career. Can you be a lawyer, accountant, doctor, maybe teacher, something like that. Respectable career. So what I found is most people that was working in my profession was in it, not because they loved it or because they had a passion for it, but because they made that choice out of 4 presented to him on a plate, which meant they had no passion, so they had no work ethic, and I had both.
So then you complete the accountants.
Yeah.
So, is that when you formed Sedula, or what was the journey from that?
So I was part of a guy who became successful, and I felt like I had an input into that journey, and that's where I got my self-fulfillment from, being part of a success. Small part.
So you were working for a company at that point? Yeah.
So I did 3 years for him, and then his accountancy firm said, come and work for me. So I went to work for them. And what I realised then was, in practice, totally different than being an accountant in industry. In industry, you're just working on the here and now. What we're going to do, what you're not looking back so much. You're constantly looking forward. You're part of decisions and change and challenge, and you're in the thick of it. And in practice, it's really different. And what was happening in practice was they go, it's March today. All these accounts have got to be filed by the end of March. Be compliant, tick the box. It was just box ticking. It was being compliant. And I was having no impact or influence on other people's lives and journeys. So I was unfulfilled. I was doing a good job. They liked me. I was not being a part. I was getting no fulfillment, satisfaction from the role. But I did take 3 years there because I was learning more technical stuff, and I wanted to learn my craft. I wanted to be a master of what I did. And I think some people nowadays don't want to put those hard yards in. They want to go on, and I have a real problem sometimes with people's social media. I know you're the same in your industry. I do believe if somebody's in your industry, they need to look like you. If you're going to tell me what to do, I believe you've got to put the yards in first to do it. And I'm always...
I couldn't agree more, Paul. And not just for a few months, for decades.
Forever.
You know what I mean? But I'm on about up to the point of... And I know some people have just come into the industry. They might be a coach or do what you do, right? You might be young, so you haven't got that stack of evidence for a number of years. But equally in my space, if you're a coach, even if you're a year into your journey, if you're not in shape, that's a problem.
It's leadership.
Yeah.
You have to lead by example.
Yeah.
Right? You'll get that because of your sport that you're in. See, I think like an athlete. We'll come on to that in a bit later. Yeah. I think like an athlete, but my performance is business. Yeah. My sport is business. Yeah. Right? So I warm up perform and cool down like an athlete.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people in business don't do that. They just look at the performance part.
Yeah.
But if you want consistency, you have to have preparation and recovery, either side of performance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So a lot of people don't, I take business as serious as I take sport. It's my way of winning. It's my way of competing. It's my way of challenging myself on a daily basis. So coming back, I then did 3 years in an industry accountant business, 3 years in a practice type environment, working on multiple of different, learning my craft, working on lots of businesses, and then thought, I'm going to bash the two together. I'm going to work with high performing people on high growth journeys, and I'm going to look after their finance in a more broader term was the original part. And what I didn't realise was that would really come more so about being a business coach. And the more successful I became, the truth of the matter is really, I'm probably more of a life coach than a business coach, because
I agree.
Anything going right or wrong with a business, Kirk, or your life, in the end gets centered around you as an individual, right? If you're a business leader and things aren't going right in your organisation, the buck stops with you. And then you've got to look at, how are you making decisions? How are you leading? And that will always come back to who are the person you are, what you're trying to be. What's your own philosophy? What are your values? Can you get people to buy into them values? And I started then to, I guess, I'm quite deep, It's a bit like this, right? If somebody says to me, I want to be better at speaking, let's just use that as an example. There's other people in this country or in the world that'll go, here's a session on how to speak better, how to articulate better. How I would just do a session on how to improve your confidence and self-belief, right? Because I don't think people get deep enough nowadays. So they try to have these periphery things that go on the outside. Here's a communication course. All right, maybe this, but this is just my opinion. My opinion is we've got to deal with the individual. We've got to put individuals first. If you're lacking, I'm not saying that there isn't a space for them further down the line, but if somebody wants to be good at speaking, first thing you got to do is build up your confidence and your self-belief system.
Sorry to chip in there, Paul, because I've got a communication coach, right? But exactly like you just said, that wouldn't be worth its salt if I hadn't worked on the internal confidence and internal belief to then translate and articulate a message with genuine emotion and impact the other end. You can learn how to speak if there's no emotion and genuine conviction and confidence with what you say, irrelevant how you've been taught to speak. It's pointless.
It's wooden.
Yeah.
If you can't speak from the heart and from the soul, you can't speak with authenticity, which is a word that gets bandied about far too much nowadays, people pretending they're being authentic.
Just by saying the word authentic.
Exactly. So that's why I try and avoid the word, even though if I go back 7 or 8 years ago, I thought it was a buzzword. It's probably the word I spoke about most. But you got to speak from the heart. The
thing is, Paul, sorry to chip in there, right? I totally agree, and it's one of the most important things to be 100% authentic. We listened to Richard Mowat, didn't we, at our event on that. But rather than just say it, be it.
Totally. Lead by example.
Yeah.
And so that in every case, in every business, the things that are going right or the things that are going wrong are driven by the behaviours of the leader, and now they're able to get as many people on board with the charge to, with the mission as they can. So it becomes less about how to get more sales or how to recruit or how to get all the. It becomes more about how do you create a culture of excellence, a culture of performance, a culture of winning, and that will always come from talking about the individuals, what it is they're trying to achieve, what their flaws are, and how do we fix them. And so then you start to become more of a human coach than you do. And I've got no qualifications in all this, but I've got 2,500 clients, and I've sat in a lot of board meetings, and I've listened to a lot of stories, and I mean a lot of stories. And over a period of time, you realise most of our problems are all the same. So it's like slight idiosyncrasy to each one of us.
What are the most common problems you see in business? Because that is a staggering amount of boardrooms and people you've worked with, right? That probably have the sole goal of making as much money as possible and living with freedom in some capacity. What do you see as like common problems or not flaws or just gaps?
So I think most people of high degree. So I then got my own business. I've then got a podcast and a leadership club, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Right.
Yeah, we'll come back to this. But just while we're on that
but I've interviewed about 200 people, right? The highest performers that exist in some cases, and most of them are fueled by flaws in their makeup, right? And I'd rather talk about me here then for a bit, because I'm clearly not going to talk about individuals. But if I look at my need for validation driven by insecurity. And I get my validation by, being associated with building something. With being associated with success, right? It's a bit of a fuck 'em type scenario, right? And so the most common problems you see are derived from insecurities of people, right? And that then drives a fire in the belly, which means they want to be more than everybody else because they're seeking that validation they didn't get as a kid.
Okay.
In a lot of cases. And that's anything from dads leaving to parents splitting up to worse tragedies than that. And even in a sort of, public school, being sent to boarding school, so it's... Or being the lesser of two brothers, or my sister got all the attention, or all these things that can be quite subtle but leave.
So there's a part, again, I might be pissing in the wind here, right? But there's a part across the board where people just don't feel they're enough.
There you go. So then what happens is decisions get made out of ego, right? And the reality of most decisions that are made out of ego tend to be incorrect decisions. So I was with somebody once and she came to me and said, got a problem. It's a great example, this. And I said, go on, what's your problem? And she said, Katie, I'm making up the name. She's outperforming now. This was a business owner. And she said, Katie's outperforming now 3 months on the run. And everybody in the organisation can see that. And I said, okay, what's the problem? She said, Katie's outperformed me 3 months on the run. And I said, yeah, I'm waiting to see what the problem is. And she's like, well, now everybody thinks Katie is a higher performer than I am. And I'm like, your only problem is that you've got a problem with Katie. And the second problem you've got is you haven't got enough Katies, right? But I think that was just a real simple, and I mean, there's thousands of examples of where we struggle to. I'll tell you another big problem. We don't have difficult conversations with people.
Can you tell me more about that? Because even as a business owner myself, this is something I've heard again from elite level entrepreneurs. But to tell me what that means to you.
Because it's ego. Because people want to be liked.
Okay.
So rather than upholding the standard, which is your job, by the way, as a leader, particularly on behalf of all the other people that want to be high performers, so it's your job. What they'll do is think, that person's not up to scratch. It's not up to standard. But I'm going to give it a pass. Because I don't want to come across as, I want to be liked. I want the validation of my team. I want to be liked. And you want to be liked because you might have felt disliked at a time in your life. So now you want to be liked. So now you're doing things for likes. You're not doing things to get to where you need to go. And more so, you're not protecting the high performers in the team. Because we have to understand, mediocre people don't like high performers. And high performers don't like mediocre people. So you can't have a mix of them in a winning team. If you're genuinely honest and you genuinely want to create high performance and succeed, then you need to make sure you get everybody on the bus and create a culture of high performance. And that means having difficult conversations with people who aren't quite up to scratch and getting rid of them. But most people in business don't do that. If you contrast that to sport, that's the biggest learning I've learned from acting for lots of sports people. Feedback is a gift, and they accept all critique. and they accept it in the spirit of being better, right? So they're more, I think ruthless is the word, but not mistaken for a negative connotation of ruthless. They're more capable of making the decisions and having the conversations that they need to get to the objective and mission that they've set. And in business, that's clouded often by our ego. And so I always check in with myself to think, was that decision made in the spirit of where we're heading here, or was it made in the spirit of me protecting my ego? Because that ultimately is where we make the most stupid decisions, when we're not doing it based on where we're trying to get to and what the objective is. And I see that in business time and time again.
Yeah, which brings us on to talk a little bit more specifically about Sedulo, Paul. You came into the industry as an accountant a bit, and it's clear to see what you've done with Sedulo. It's way different than your standard accountancy firms and what you deliver. And it's definitely not another firm. I can see that, right? Yeah. For me, it's a brand and it's a movement. Yeah. Right. What was your vision behind it? And what is Sedulo? Like, just to give like specifically to anyone.
Yeah. Listening. So if you look at what we do as a firm, there's 250 consultants at the moment, and we advise people. So we have a list, a plethora of services that mean we can put the client at the centre, and around that, there's anything financial you would need, and whether or not that is accountancy or it's selling your business or buying businesses or wealth management and all the practical stuff. But really the heart of it is, let's look at clients and let's see if we can have influence on that journey, not just be a byproduct of that journey, but have influence. And then from an individual, you start off thinking, well, I want to earn money, right? I want to earn X amount. I want financial freedom. Some people think, I've never been a car person, but, I might want a nice car. I might want a better house. I might want a better life for my family. And you set off with some goals, and they tend to be numerical goals, Kirk, right? I want to earn, what about if we're a £500,000 business? And you get to £500,000 and you realise, might as well get to 1 million. You get to 1 million, you think 2 becomes 5, it's just a number. There is no satisfaction or fulfilment I've ever experienced as a fact as a result of it hitting a number. So then, if you're like me, you get lost because you think, what's it all for? Am I ever going to be satisfied? Am I ever going to be content? Am I ever going to be fulfilled? Am I ever going to be happy? And then it's quite common for people to become destabilised, because all the things you think that make you going to happy don't make you happy. So then you think, what's this all for? What's the meaning? And am I odd? Am I a bit mad? And am I always going to live a life of unhappiness and ungratefulness and no gratitude for what I've got and what I'm collecting along the way? And that leads, in my case, to high levels of anxiety. That makes it even worse. So I think there's a period in the journey where you're going to have ups and downs, and I think that's been probably the biggest challenge. Coming back to Sedulo, we've grown and we've grown and grown. We're, what people from the outside was deemed successful, but you get to the point where you're not driven by money, and actually you want to create an environment where you win together. I think the best thing about sport, and a lot of people have confirmed this when I've talked about the gold medals they've won at the Olympics or the Premier League titles or the Super League titles or whatever it is, it's actually who they won them with. It's who they won them with. When they want to reminisce about their careers, the memories was the changing room afterwards. It wasn't the podium where they were stood on their own with a gold medal. It was a celebration with the, coach and family afterwards. Yeah. So they all talk about that. And it got me thinking, hold on a minute here, we have to have an organisation where we can share memories. The last thing I would want to do is be an organisation where it's so successful I've got 4 cars on my drive. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If you've took the time to look in the mirror and analysed yourself right the way back to why you're doing what you're doing, I'd be surprised if you're driven by wanting 4 Ferraris on the drive. I think you're really driven by something else. So let's be honest with ourselves in the mirror. Because if we can be honest with one person in our life, it's ourself in a room on our own. And then we can find some answers. So the last thing I would want is 4 Ferraris on the drive, knowing that I work with somebody else who's struggling to make ends meet. That doesn't feel right. No. On the flip side, if you race for Mercedes, Formula One team, the driver's going to get paid more than the person in the pit lane. So there is a balance with that, right? We have to understand that. But how do we go on a mission together? So for me, I soon realised, number one, I'm unfulfilled by hitting figures.
And what year of business, mate? Because this will be fascinating. We have a magnitude of different entrepreneurs. Some people have been in business maybe for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10. I think I put on a pedestal certain milestones, and I think the first one was £1 million. Yeah.
I didn't even bat an eyelid. I just moved on to 2. Then I wanted to open in Leeds, which we did. 2 took us to 4. I thought we'll really have arrived when we're 2 cities. £4 million. How many staff do we have at £4 million? Probably 80 staff at that point, 70, 80 staff. Didn't matter. So I did London. It didn't matter. And after hitting about 4 or 5 milestones, you just go, actually, it doesn't matter. I was with Pete Cowgill, who got JD Sports up to 10 billion, 12 billion, I think, just before he left. He was on my podcast when there was at 6 billion. And I said, what gets you up every morning? And he said, getting to 6.1 billion. And you think, well, here's me at 6 million, right? And here's him at 6.1 billion, trying to get to 6.2. You're pissing in the wind, right? Not only are you pissing in the wind as an individual being fulfilled, how do you get everybody on board with saying, let's get to 10 mil? Everybody you work with wants to know what's in it for them.
Of course, absolutely.
They want to know what's in it for them.
Yeah.
All right, more opportunity, more wages, fine. But really what you want to do is get people on board where you can share the journey. And the great sports teams, the great sports clubs are unbelievable. When you look at like Man United, Alex Ferguson, I'm from Man United, Manchester, I'm a Stockport fan, but I do look at sporting organisations as the most transparent organisations we get to see, the ones that win and the ones that lose. And you look at Man United, the 20-odd years ago, and the pride that the receptionist who just passed away not that long ago.
Kathy? Someone called Kathy?
Right?
Yeah.
The whole of Man United turned up. Alex Ferguson was there. David Beckham was there. Brian Robson was there. This was for the lady on reception. I'm not playing down the role as lady on reception, and clearly they're not. She's vital to the component of high performance. And when they lifted the FA Cup or the Premier League in 1993, imagine what her face was like and how important she was. She was as important as the person that scored the goal. So how do you create that? Because then you can go on a journey with 300 of you. And you can do some incredible things. So mine was like, okay, if we leverage the community we've built and the money we look after, and we create a mission that we can all share equally, we'll become more than a business. And so our mission is to help and create positive change in the communities we exist. And that's what we judge ourselves on. The bigger we get, by the way, as an organisation, the more successful we get as an organisation, the more kids' lives we can impact. So it's important if our mission is to give back to kids. It's our mission as an organisation.
For Sejulog?
Yes, so, that's our mission.
How do you do that with that? That's
so,
fascinating. So
if that's our mission, part of our objective is, in order to fulfil more the lives of more kids and change the lives of more kids, we have to become more successful and we have to be sustainable. So we have a foundation that we've built, right? And the foundation is the bedrock of the organisation. Actually, just yesterday, 13 people jumped out of a plane on behalf of the foundation, and that was 30 members of staff at all different. I mean, I didn't even know they was doing it because I'm not getting involved in that. Just so you know, right? There's a limit to what I can do, and that's over my limits, right? But when I was watching the people jump out of the plane and I wasn't there, partners and shareholders, marketing, technical people, administrators, people on our front of house team, events, marketing,
Yeah.
all walks of our organisation. That's what made me proud of people jumping out. It wasn't who was jumping out. It was their location within the organisation. 13 people decided to jump out of a plane on behalf of our mission from all different areas. That's what makes our organisation so special.
How do you create that though, Paul? I mean, especially like when you've got, how many people in the company now?
Nearly 250.
Nearly 250, and you're in
London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Leeds, Manchester.
Yeah.
And it comes back to culture. It comes back to having...
It's a word that does get brandished about. People talk about culture. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the next word then is authenticity, because I mean what I say. I mean what I say. I'm not fucking doing it for likes. I'm not doing it artificially. I can often go back to little Paul and think that kid on school dinners, we're going to change his life. I'll tell you what the foundation does in a bit, by the way, because we've not actually gone through the detail, but we're going to change kids' lives, right? And I mean it. So if I mean it and I can constantly talk about it and message it, which we do, and people know me who work in the organisation, they know we're not messing about. They know we mean it. And it's a high, I'm quite a hard taskmaster. You know, my standards are high. That's why I only want to work with high performers, by the way. But I want to work with high performers who've got a heart and a soul.
Yeah.
I want to work with high performers who want to give back. So when we do our toy appeal, it started off with me, right? It started off with me thinking I've got, at the time, a 3-4-year-old lad, my first son. And I thought, I don't want him to grow up spoiled. So let's buy presents for kids that don't have, that are not going to get presents. So we bought about 8 gifts and we put them in the Asda where you dropped them off at the time. I'm trying to teach him about kids that don't have much, you know, that's going to make a kid's present. But he's 4 or 5, kids' Christmas. He doesn't really understand. But then the following year, I had 5 or 6 staff. I thought, well, let's do this together. So we did. I think we bought 17 presents, year 1 in the business. Last year we bought 17,000, or we facilitated 17,000 presents being given to 1,300 children who mainly in care, or they're in and out of care, but they're at the lowest rung of the poverty ladder in the UK. And the thing about them is, mate, is it's not like we just send out, you know, a Birmingham City football to a Coventry City fan, you know, who's 7 or 8. We go into the care system and we understand those kids and their needs and what they want. We get a Christmas list of every one of them, and every single Santa sack, which has got a minimum of 12 presents in each, is bespoke to that kid.
Wow.
So that first part was the first sort of the first project that we did as an organisation. Christmas, just putting a bit of love back into kids, you know, a bit of respite, and then we thought, well, how do we go a bit deeper? And when COVID come, it was like, well, all right, we're giving all these kids Christmas presents. That's great. We started to look at when they got to age 11, what could we do? And we've seen that with COVID in particular, these kids were being asked to homeschool, and most of them are broken homes. Most of them, not all of them, you know, some of them have got mums and dads in who want to do right, but some of them don't. Some of them got mums who just can't provide for the kids. So we provided school equipment. And then we started to think, how do we go deeper? So I started to put things in there because I know these kids are bullied. I know they are, because no disrespect here, but they don't have deodorants. They smell. They don't have, you know, those kind of identity things you have, like trainers and, you know, all the things like guys who buy cars when they're older and put it on social because they want to create an identity. Yeah. When you're a kid, it's your trainers, isn't it? Absolutely. Or your cap or your coat. Yeah. So it's like, how can we give them something towards brands that make them feel credible? Then we started to give them hot meals over the summer, but not just hot meals, Nando's. Importantly, Nando's, because they can then be included in the conversation.
They don't feel like they're not part of normal society. They don't feel that they're just like an alien on a different planet.
Yeah, because otherwise they're excluded from the conversation.
And that can shape their whole future.
And probably then bullied. Right? Because they haven't got the nice clothes. They don't smell that great. They can't engage in the conversations where people are going for a cheeky Nando's and talking about it. Well, they can now because we provide it.
Amazing.
So that was number 2. Then we found out women were, or girls, should I say, in their teens that we were helping weren't attending school one day a month, 1 week a month, because they come on the periods, they start the periods, and they don't have period products. So they smell, and then they get bullied. So they decide, actually, it's better to just not turn up for that 1 week. So we provided them an activation where they get a QR code within their, at Christmas, within their, oh no, sorry, not Christmas, within their back to school box that they get. And if they scan it, put their details in, we send them period products until they're 18 for the rest of their educational life.
Unbelievable.
So these people lack basic confidence and basic coming back again to basic communication. So but what they really lack is self-belief and confidence, and they lack opportunity. So we started to go, how do we fix this? So we bring them in, and we have certain days that they can come in, and we try to build their inner confidence, right, and start to rebuild them as people. And so we have those. So they come
days
into all 5 offices.
Oh wow!
And we take them on days, bits of respite. So we might book a farm out and just get them to learn about farms. But just sometimes we try and integrate. For those parents that have got no money but do want to share experiences and have memories with their kids. Some don't, but some do. So we provide that respite breaks to farms and so on and so forth. Then we get them in and we mentor them. So we give mentorship programs. And then the final part, this is all the journey, right? We're going to get to a point where the age of 16 to 18, we start to integrate them in our client base, provide them with education, and try and break that poverty cycle. So that's the whole thing. And if you look at that just comes from my starting position. In reality, it just comes from me going all the way back to where I started. Kids on school dinners with nothing to eat, probably from broken homes. And how do we fix that and give them an opportunity? So when that is your mission as an organisation, it's deeper and more meaningful a purpose than just going, we want to sell as many snacks as we can. We want to build the best advisory firm in the UK, or be the best accountant, or be the best. We do want to do that, but that actually is just the strategy to meet the mission and objective of how do we help create and change kids' lives.
It's unbelievable. So it's like by performing and continually growing, even financially, that allows you to give back the way you do, Paul, because if you didn't keep growing, there's no way you can give back the way you do.
And we're only going to get deeper and deeper, and it's only going to get better and better. Coming back to that word we've touched on, purpose, you get a real insight when you deal with sports people about the strength of purpose. Because come the age of 36, if they're lucky, or 38 or 40, they've now had discipline, commitment, a framework of structure their whole lives, and a purpose to win things, be part of a team, perform, whatever it is. And it's just taken from them like that. Like that. And you see, you don't have to look very far to look at ex-sports people who have fallen to pieces because of a lack of purpose. Well, I've seen that in sport, and I've seen it in business when people sell the business. I've seen it also when people hit the milestones that they wanted to hit and receive zero fulfilment, zero contentment, zero satisfaction. So seeing that firsthand from a selfish perspective, and giving does have a selfish part of it. We have to be selfish if we want to high perform. We want to succeed. Don't know why people think this word selfish is a dirty word. It's an essential ingredient in the makeup of somebody that wants to succeed. We have to, something has to give. And at some point we have to be selfish. But it comes back down to, how do you maintain a level of purpose, Paul, for the rest of your life? Because I've seen people who lack it. Yeah. And I don't want to be somebody that lacks purpose. So creating a mission that actually is not accomplishable. There's always going to be kids that need our help. It means I've got an infinite purpose. And that is a selfish part, if you like, of why I also kind of manoeuvred, chose, led to this kind of formation of the foundation and giving back.
Amazing. And with regards to be the standard, that's obviously a leadership group, and you can add more granular details on this. So Jula is your main business vehicle. You are clearly very passionate about giving back, and like you say, you've interviewed all these elite level businessmen and sports people.
Yeah.
Why be the standard? Why was that formed, and when?
One of the things I've really realised that I like doing is helping people. I get a buzz off it.
I think anyone listening to this so far will clearly realise, when I said at the start of this, if there's one person who just loves giving back, and this is from the heart, Paul, and honestly, it's what a lot of people need to hear. Really,
I just love helping people. Maybe that gives me my own validation.
It meets a need. It's contribution. It's a spiritual need, Paul, but you're going to find a way to meet that need in some capacity, whether it's empowering or disempowering. So you might as well be.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot, like the obsession. Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with what I do. Mm-hmm. I'm well aware, though, that obsession can lend itself to far worse obsessions, right? So you've got to choose your pathway carefully, because we're born with these. I wouldn't say it's dysfunction, but it can lead to dysfunction for sure, if it's not in its own isolation. But I like helping people, and I could see that in business we had this need for helping people. So I was friends with Kevin Sinfield, who, for those people who don't know, coming back to identity before I go into Kev, he won 7 Super League titles, I think, as a rugby league player. World Player of the Year, massive legend in that sport, retired. And I remember him saying to me, I don't want my identity to being attached to rugby league. It's quite poignant, that really, coming back to the point that I just said, because I think most people who listen to this podcast who know Kev, half of them don't even know he played rugby league anymore. They don't know he's the best player in the world at one point, because he then went on into rugby union in sport and won the Premiership as a coach with Leicester. He's now at the England setup. But what he's actually most known for now is the guy who sets crazy projects, and who set out to raise £77,000 for motor neurons disease. Currently stands at about 12 million, right? So most people now know him from the guy who creates awareness and raises funds for the first MND centre to be built in Leeds for the motor neurons disease community. And that's a great example of somebody who's transcended their identity. Anyway, I'm fortunate to know Kev, and I was talking to him about some of the things we've discussed here. What I was also talking to him about is the lack of support networks, and obviously Built to Last is one of them, but there is a lack of support networks out there for high performers.
Couldn't agree more.
Particularly in business. So, like when I mentioned before, like preparation, performance, recovery. Mm-hmm. If you look at most athletes and you looked at the amount of time they spend on preparation and recovery, the performance is a real small part of that. And it's inside out for business. We hardly do any recovery in any preparation. It's just all performance. Just get up. No matter what you've done the day before, just get up and go again and go again and go again. And of course, repetition of that can't lead to consistently high performance. It's impossible. So I started to reach out to Kevin and say, there isn't any support. There's no support there for high-level people who are building brilliant businesses, but inside are lacking in many areas. And he talked about the support mechanism of a sleep coach, a nutritionist, a posture coach, a sports psychologist. Mm-hmm. Christ, all these different personal training, all these different aspects of performance that somebody needs if they want to be a consistently performer, but more holistic performer on everyday life as well as just in business. And so we was like, let's put a club together. So we did. And it's a 1 day a month club where everybody gets together, and it's a 1 day session, very similar to your sessions. We have a session in the morning, which is delivered by a sports person. And then we have a surgery of 3 or 4 of us, which is quite intimate, dealing with each other's problems. And then we have an afternoon session, which is a business leader. And the speakers have been Sugar Ray Leonard, You came down, didn't you, actually? You came to Auschwitz with us, didn't you?
Krakow. Yeah, that was...
We'll talk about that in a sec, maybe.
Yes.
Giving people time to reflect. But we had Sugar Ray Leonard,
some giants,
Gary Neville. We've had your mate Al from Grenade.
Yep.
We've had Oliver from My Protein, Pete Cowie, JD Sports.
One of the Hearns as well.
Barry Hearn, Eddie Hearn, Tony Bellew, David Hay, Rebecca Edlington, Karen Brady. We've got, we've just had some unbelievable speakers. We've got Sir Chris Hoy coming up.
You said Graham Souness was one of the best.
Graham Souness was fantastic. We've had loads. Will Greenwood, Will Carlin, who are now do the London Club, which we've just set up down in London. So it's just been about learning from what makes a winning mindset mentality. What did they go through in order to get where they got to, that we're all going to go through, and how did they overcome it? And you find it's similar problems, whether or not it was Alistair Brownlee winning the Olympic gold medal, Rebecca Edlington, or it was James Timpson trying to create the best shoe repair shop in the UK.
But that's why you can talk with so much validation. You spoke to quite a few heavy hitters in business and heavy hitters in sport.
Yeah.
And problems are similar, and so much of it comes back to identity and purpose, right, as well.
It does.
Yeah.
So that's been the club, and it's been a game changer, really. Game changer for me. Unbelievable self-learning and self-development. Because I do need to point out here, Kurt, you're not talking to a well-put-together kiddie. You're not talking to a guy who's perfect. You're not talking to a guy who's got all the answers. I need to be very clear about this. Everything that I've just said are different tools in my armour, which are helpful in me navigating the same shit everybody else is navigating. I might have more tools now because of a journey I've been on than some people. But it doesn't mean I don't have the ability to fall off the rails, lose discipline, throw my obsession into the wrong areas, be egotistical. I'm not pretending here that I'm not any of what I've just talked about, let me be clear. And neither should anybody else. But we should cut ourselves some slack, which I think is another important point about this, because the amount of times, Kirk, I used to beat myself up, and still do, for not being good enough. It's unbelievable, right? But I have developed a toolkit that means I might beat myself up a little bit less than I used to. I might feel like a failure a little bit less than I used to. And even if I do beat myself up and feel like a failure, I now realise everybody does. And it's okay.
I couldn't agree more, Paul, because look, we've got a similar type of clientele, and I, like you, used to put a lot of people on a pedestal and go, God, these, whether it's a business owner with millions in the bank, you'd think there's no flaws to their makeup. Same with, when you first meet a sporting icon, God, everyone's got chinks in their armour, haven't they?
Yeah.
Every single one of them.
And mostly, not all, most high performers I've met, and it's not 55%, it's 90%, have been driven and fueled by some negative emotions, behaviours and memories that they attach to it. And so most people listening to these podcasts are probably high performers, and most of them will relate to most of what I've just said. There'll be the odd one that's thinking, I don't know what he's on about here. And fair play to you, right? I remember Alistair Brownlee interviewing Alistair, and he didn't have any of that. He went to grammar school, just he's built different. Kevin Sinfield, he's just built different. But most of the people, that 90% of the people, and this is why I always come back to people. I always come back to self-belief, ego, vulnerability, being fragile. And I think, the more you share it, the less fragile you are. So I think the more you shy away from saying you're insecure, it's mental, this, right? If somebody says to me I'm insecure, I'm cool about that. In fact, I know I am. I'm all right with it. But there was a time, Kirk, that if somebody would have said that to me, I would have hit the roof, because it was such a, what's the word where somebody nudges you? What's it called? Like, not chinking your armour, but it's so sensitive, it was. Now, the more you talk about it, you desensitise yourself to your flaws. So you can admit, I'm insecure. Who cares? So what?
I think the key thing you're getting at, Paul, because I think me and you are very similar characters on that front, where I'm really, really, really good at criticising myself, or you've got such an obscene standard, whether it's in business or with training. And it was the same when I played football. I firmly believe that was one of the reasons I didn't make it.
Yeah.
So it was exhausting, the standards are set. But what you're getting at is, and I think this is what I'm trying to teach, you're trying to teach, is how can you reduce the lag time? How can, when that feeling does come along, whether it's insecurity, anxiousness, not feeling good enough, how can you shorten the time that you feel like that versus changing how you feel?
Totally.
Because all of us, like you just said, whether it's insecurity, anxiousness, all these different things, we all feel that, but some people, that can drag on for a week, a month, and cause drastic consequences. So don't try and fight that. And we heard this, didn't we, at our event with Richard Mowat about don't suppress the emotions. But and I think it's even more prevalent in entrepreneurs and business owners and elite level sportsmen as well. We're just really, really good at beating ourselves up and really sometimes just feeling like that you shouldn't be feeling this way because you've got this invincibility about you, and it's bullshit.
Yeah. And yet the thing is things not being good enough and beating yourself up, we have to accept is a strength. It's those marginal gains. It's the thing that makes us better today than we was yesterday.
If you look at it that way.
Yes.
If you look at it that way.
Exactly. We have to also accept that we're always on this balance. We're always on a tipping edge of if you look at it that way, then you accept the positive. The negative side of it is, what I always think is, it's how you react to a situation, right? How do you learn to react to a situation of being anxious? If you're Tony Bellew, the boxer, he used to love the butterflies in his stomach, right? Whereas if we went to go on speaking and we got butterflies in our stomach, perfectly physiological reaction to some nerves, that will sometimes decapitate people. They will not be able to perform because they're now reacting to a physiological emotion of butterflies in your stomach or sickness or nerves or a bit edginess. And yet, I spoke to so many boxers and I was fascinated by this. I always used to say to them, and I still do, what did you feel like before the curtain goes back, when your gloves are on and you're about to... I think I'd pass out at that point, or I'd freeze and they're like, no, there was times where we didn't get that before a fight, where we would feel, shit, we're not ready for performance here. So it comes back to the reaction, doesn't it? Right.
What do you do, Paul? What do you do, Paul, when you're in situations like that, whether it's business or an interview, or because like you say, you're leading a team, right? And the big takeaway I've got so far, and hopefully everyone has too, that when you talk about culture, if it's coming back to you as the leader, and you're still dealing with these anxiousness, these nerves from time to time, what do you do when you have these feelings, but know you've still got to perform, whether it's in a team meeting, a negotiation, or something that's really important? Is there anything particular you do?
The first part is you become aware of them. And the second part, you accept them. It really is as simple as that. I'm not saying that overcomes it, but I used a word before that I've never used before, but I like it. You almost desensitize yourself to it. So if you keep going out your comfort zone, you're going to feel nervous and edgy, and you're going to grow. If you're not getting nervous and edgy, you're not out your comfort zone. So you're in your comfort zone, and you're not growing.
So your answer to that is do it more, because then all of a sudden it becomes the norm and it's not a big deal. Whereas if you're only doing it every now and then, it's going to be a bigger moment than it needs to be.
Totally. The key is you still feel the same. I still get insecurities and I get anxiety and nervousness, but my reaction to it is different than what it was 10 years ago. My reaction to somebody calling me insecure is different than it was 5 years ago. My reaction to going to perform, let's say public speaking, and feeling nervous is the same feeling.
Yeah.
But my reaction to it is I'm aware of it. And then I kind of try to flip it on its head and go, okay, now we're aware of it, accept it. It is what it is. And actually now, this is us going out of our comfort zone. It's something that we must do. And if you want to be elite, if you want to be high performing, if you want to be in best in class, if you want to push yourself that bit further, you're going to always have to live closer to the edge of risk. And when you put yourself closer to the edge of progress and risk, you're always going to put yourself closer to the edge of anxiety and nervousness because you're in the unknown. And we have to accept that that's where we position ourselves because we have a choice.
I also think as well, Paul, whether you realise it or not, that in those moments, you need to push through your comfort zone, deal with those nerves. Knowingly or unknowingly, I think one of the things that helps you push through it is the fact you know that you're doing it for the people and you're doing it to help people.
Yeah.
And it's not about you, because I even found, Paul, that, I do a lot of speaking now and things like that. And like you can put a lot of pressure. I can put a lot of pressure on myself, whether it's playing football, whether it's speaking, whether it's work, whether it's a meeting. But reframing that to go, you know what? How can I be helpful today? How can I be useful? How can I be a person of value?
I totally agree. The one thing I would be honest about is the first thing I'm thinking about is how do I survive?
Okay.
I am thinking inwardly and going. Freezing at this moment doesn't help. Being anxious every day is tiring. Yeah. I've been there. Yeah. Having panic attacks, going back to all that, right, is debilitating, dysfunctional. It's tiring. So the truth of the matter is, mate, I'm still in survival mode. When I feel uncomfortable, I'm in survival mode. How do I get through it? I'm aware that I'm putting myself through it by choice. I don't have to go and do a speaking gig. I don't have to put all my financial stability on the line to go and get bigger. But I constantly do that. I'm aware that there's a part of me, obviously the left and right side of the brain and the chimp paradox type stuff. I'm aware there's a part of me that just lives on the edge. I'm aware of me, there's a part of me that hates living on the edge because it drags me towards anxious feelings and thoughts. And then I'm aware that there's a part in between that is balance. How do we prepare? How do we recover? And in the middle of it, how are we aware enough to accept and control our nerves? On that note, can I tell you something, right? A little story, which you may or may not have noticed, but it's relevant to you. And some people will resonate with this, so I'll say it. When I was doing your speaking at the Mayfair, I was sat looking at you and about 15, 20 minutes in, answering questions like we're doing now. And then I looked around the room and had a wave of anxiety.
What, during your talk?
In the talk.
You wouldn't have known, by the way.
Right? And the wave came through me from my feet right the way through. And I thought, oh, I don't like that. Where's that come from? I felt comfortable. And then we was on stools, if you remember. So my mind, you're asking me a question at this point. My mind goes, fuck, this stool's pretty high up. So if I pass out now, I'm going to hit the floor. And this is going to be embarrassing. Control yourself, Paul. Control yourself, Paul. Why are you feeling like this? Take a sip of water. Have a breath. And you're talking. You actually made a joke that I didn't laugh at, right? So if it's filmed...
It's probably not funny anyway, Paul.
It wasn't that your joke wasn't funny. I wasn't listening to you. At the point, my mind's going, fuck, don't pass out, don't pass out, don't pass out.
You've got a great poker face, by the way, okay. Paul.
It's about 20 minutes in. And I swear, Kirk, I nearly turned round to you and said, it was getting that bad. This is about a minute. I'm thinking, oh, now I'm starting to get even fuzzy cheeks, as if I can feel almost oxygen being... And you're talking at this point, and you've asked me a question, and I'm sipping my water, and I'm thinking, you're going to pass out any second now. This is only, 4 months ago? Yeah. And I nearly said, Kirk, I'm really sorry. I've just took a funny turn. I'm going to have to end the discussion. Yeah. And I went to say it to you. That's how close. That's how close.
Any client listening to this back, bearing in mind, how many messages you had off our clients that said, it was literally life-changing them listening to you. The amount of messages, I've never had a speaker with so many messages from clients. It was that good.
Well, we nearly didn't get to anywhere near.
I don't know how.
Because 20 minutes in, that's how I felt.
Yeah.
And I started to position myself like this, as if to think, if I pass out now and I fall, and then I thought, no, I'm just going to tell Kirk, I've had a funny turn at the end of the day. There's nothing we can do about this. We'll just have to end.
Yeah.
And I carried on breathing and I carried on having my water, and you got me. And it took about 5 minutes.
God,
and then all of a sudden it had gone.
I wouldn't have known.
And there was nothing I could do about that, Kirk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what you're dealing with. And the reason why I say that is because there'll be some people who I tell that to, and they're like, no, I can't believe that's, but that is the feelings that still come along. So the question is then, do you, this is a point that I want to make actually, do you, and this is what I see some business people do, they think I'm not feeling great, or I'm unfulfilled, or I don't think things are going right in my life, or I feel unhealthy, or whatever it is. I feel too stressed, too depressed, too anxious, too nervous, too overwhelmed. I'm going to reduce my performance. And I look at it like this. Me and you want to win the 100-metre gold medal at the next Olympics, you better be running 9.5. You can't just make up, it's getting too hard this, so let's do it at 10.5, right? If you've got a business, you've got to do in your business everything it takes to succeed. It's what you do left and right of that. Warm up and cool down, preparation for performance, recovery from performance. That must mean you're still able to maintain the level of performance that you're demanded of. So on that basis, I turn up and I do the interview. And in the middle of it, I think, oh, where's the anxiety come from? I wasn't expecting that. And we've just got to get through it. It's as simple as that. You have to turn up. And you have to turn up even when you're not at your best. You can always give your best. You're not always at your best.
Couldn't agree more.
But you can always give your best.
And you just keep going.
And you just keep going.
Because you're going to suffer either way.
But what you don't do is retract from the uncomfort, retract from the discomfort, lessen and reduce your performance, move away from growth as an individual because of even feelings like that. You just go through them, and then you become aware. And you become aware and you accept it, and then you do it anyway.
Yeah. You could have fooled me, I'll tell you that, Paul.
That's why
I swear to God I did. I've interviewed a lot of people, obviously, at our event, and the room was packed, right? But you literally had people on the cusp of your tongue, mate. You could hear a pin drop. And one thing I'd like to say about our Built to Last clients, they're a very receptive audience and they're very engaged. There's nothing worse than when you speak to an audience and they're there, but they're not there. It's the same with your Be the Standard, such a warm collection of people, right? Because that's horrendous as a speaker.
I've had that
We've
before.
all been there.
I've had that before.
Awful.
Yeah. Do you know the problem with what I said before?
Yeah.
Mediocre people don't like high performers, and high-performing people don't like mediocrity. So when I talk, I tell the truth. I tell the truth, right? And I'm deep with it. Listen to this podcast, because the truth comes from within. So you have to go within. You have to go deep. Mediocre people don't want to hear what I've just said, right? And they're haters, and it's fine. It's fine. The pennies might drop with them, but I won't make the penny drop. I will not make the penny drop, make a mediocre person high performing, right? So when you deliver a talk, and it's a bit like, how do I create a business I'm trying to create? I have to have people around me that when I talk like this, it lands with them. Because if they think dickhead, which some people will do to this podcast, right? It's people that don't want to look in the mirror and face the truth about mediocrity. They want to pretend the high performers when they're mediocre, right? That's what happens. So when you do a talk, I now always go, who's the audience and what are they and what's the background? Because I'm well aware that this talk only lands on high performers. It doesn't land any of this.
I get it.
With mediocre people.
I get it. No, I get it. I've had it before. Even Gab, sometimes she'll say to me, Kurt, that's a bit much. I'm like, I'm just being me. And it's, as long as I know I've got integrity and from a place of love. I'm trying to make a difference. All right, if I'm too much, okay, you might not like my personality, and if you don't like my personality, you're probably on the wrong podcast now, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right, we've probably got different values, and that's okay, and I don't want to force my way on anyone else.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You've just mentioned your value system, and I think it's so important. We talked about this when we was obviously at your event.
Well, you took the words out of my mouth, mate, because you talk about going deep, and I want you to speak about values and something that might be. I think there's a lot of people listening to this who wouldn't have even thought of the word eulogy and values. Speak to me about that.
So it was important what you just said. You're just being you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're being you, and you mentioned integrity and honesty, I think you said. And in reality, they must be two values that are important to you.
Absolutely.
And I think it's important we all understand what our values are, right? And I've said this a million times. If I go, here's Sejulo's mission, loads of people who've got a business going, here's our mission statement, here's our values and here's our behaviours, and here's our culture. And you say to them, business leader or the management team, just align yours and tell me yours. Yours as Kirk Miller or as Paul Cheetham. What are your values? Mm-hmm. Hardly anyone knows what they are. They've never written them down. They've never took time to reflect, to realise what are the non-negotiables of their values. Because most of the times, if we want to be liked or we feel insecure or we make a decision and we feel, is that the right decision? Is it the wrong decision? Where's your anchor point to go back to? Or was it said from the right place? If you're saying it to be a dickhead, you're a dickhead. If you were saying it because if what you said had integrity and came from the right place to help someone, you're still not going to get it right all the time.
Absolutely.
But if you get it wrong, I think that's okay. Get it wrong. We all get stuff wrong, and that's fine. But it's really wrong if you say, I'm somebody who values integrity, and you make up a lie. That's not okay at all. That's not okay at all. Let's be clear here. It's black and white. You can't say you have integrity, and be a liar. Because then if you get it wrong, well, you're just going against your grain. So I feel like not enough of us take the time to reflect on what we're actually doing it for. And if I look at the lack of fulfilment I got from hitting numbers, because I was never doing it to hit numbers, right? I was doing it for a certain goal. If you like, I actually called it my eulogy, which it is my eulogy, but actually what it really is my greater purpose. My purpose is not to be rich. My purpose is not to drive a nice car. It's just not. So when you get those things, do not be surprised if you're not disappointed when you attain those things, because you was never doing it for that. If you think you was doing it for that and you're listening to this, go in a room, find yourself some time, look in the mirror and be honest. Why are you doing it? What are your earliest memories? What are wrongs are you trying to correct? If you look at the first line of mine, he was a good dad, a good husband, a family man. Yeah?
I've got it here, Paul. Yeah.
We're correcting wrongs. We're righting wrongs. That a 40-year-old Paul can look at a 4-year-old Paul and say, it's not his fault. That's the first part. I see people who think that it's their fault that they're now insecure. And yet when you ask them why, they've got every right to be insecure. Right? So we become aware and we accept. And then you go, come on, let's be honest with ourselves. Why are you really doing this? And when we realise why we're really doing it, we have a purpose and we have an anchor and we have non-negotiable values that we don't cross. And then when we mess up and we fail, which we do consistently, if you're pushing boundaries, as long as you can look back at your mission and your purpose and it ticked all those boxes, who cares? Because I think one of my positives is I don't like failing, but I take it and move on. Fail and move on. Fail and move on. And I think most people, or some people, fail and it stops them in the tracks. Sometimes stops them full. Sometimes it slows them down. One of the things I've realised about me is I'm not scared of failing. I'm not scared of failure. I'm okay with it. I accept it and I move on. And I think that's probably...
Was that something you had to learn, though, as Paul?
No.
Okay.
No. I've learnt why now. The point where I was going through panic attacks and unfulfillment was I was moving on, but not knowing why I was moving on. So I felt lost.
Do you mind if I share some of the sentences from your eulogy, just to give some context of... So your strapline, this is the North Star for you.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good dad, a good husband, a family man. He maximised his potential and brought others along with him on the journey. And I think you're here today, he's certainly done that. He was a man of integrity. He cared for others. He was generous. He was a successful entrepreneur who built a legacy and went on to leverage that to do good things in the community. He lived a life that was full. I mean, that's powerful, Paul. When did you do that?
It's powerful when you read it, because I'm 46 and there's going to be a point where I'm no longer here, and I'm hoping somebody else reads them words. So I can feel the hair stand up on my arms right now, right? Because that is my existence. That's what it's all about. When did I write it? I wrote it 4 years ago, so I was 41, 42. I went away with Be The Standard. We went to the Northern Lights for a day reflection. And I'd done a series of interviews. I was meeting these people. I was understanding what made them tick. I was quite, I wouldn't say I was early on my self-development journey, but in the kind of space it's in now, which I think is like self-development on steroids to a degree. It was at the start of that. And I just remember going there and seeing from other people how unfulfilled they were, how discontent, unhappy they were. And yet, to the outside world, was deemed as a success. And similar to me, people look at my social, they're going to think that guy's got it all. And I have got it all. It doesn't mean I accept and I'm grateful that I've got it all. I have to try to do that. I have to work at it. Because it's easy for us all to just move on and think, what haven't we got? And there was a point where I just thought, I don't want to go through my whole life fighting and battling for more. And if I do, I need to know why. I just need to know myself a bit more. I need to be honest with myself a little bit more. I need to have direction. And it was actually great that we all did it together, because we all read our eulogies out to one another, about 25 of us. And there was some tears in the room. It was deep. And I've not checked in with the rest of the people on that in particular, but I check in on my own often. I check in on my own often. I know who I am. So you are going to get criticised when you're a leader. You're going to get criticised when you put yourself out there. And there's going to be people say things about you that's negative, regardless. If Mother Teresa was alive today and social media existed, she'd be getting walloped on social media, wouldn't she? Let's be honest about it. So you're going to have to grow thick skin. You're not thick-skinned if you're insecure. It's very difficult to have thick skin if you come from places of traumatic memories or traumatic childhoods. But that doesn't mean your skin can't get thicker. That doesn't mean you can't deal with it in the right way. That doesn't mean you can't still do what you need to do to put yourself out there. And I think you can do that when you make decisions knowing who you are, and it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. People's opinion of me matters because we're not perfect. It matters 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10. It's not an 8 or a 9. No. It's not a 6 or a 7. And it definitely doesn't stop me being me, because I know what I'm in it for. And I actually think nowadays I'm getting better as a person because I'm trying to self-develop. So I'm improving and I'm progressing. And I think most people who say bad things about me, and people do because it comes back to me, they're either mediocre and they don't get it, or they don't know me.
Yeah, they're ignorant. In my opinion, yeah, they're ignorant.
I know who I am.
Yeah.
I look at that, and I'm not saying I'm perfect when I look at my eulogy or my purpose. Yeah. A bit morbid if you call it a eulogy, but so I've started to mix the words. It's a purpose, it's a mission, it's a North Star. It's an identity.
Yeah.
I know that deep down when I put my head on the pillow at night, I'm trying my best to be that.
Yeah.
And I got to cut myself some slack because I never used to. I used to beat myself up inside. Now I still do some days.
Yeah.
There'll be loads of people listening to this that beat themselves up most days.
Yeah, I do.
Don't cut themselves some slack.
Yeah.
And I just think sometimes, I think often, knowing who you are and the values you stand for, and knowing that mostly you make decisions based on track with the person that you want a loved one to read out. A loved one. Because that eulogy is not going to get read out anyway by somebody on social media I don't know or a competitor, right? And if they ever did, they're never going to be close enough to know the person I was. So if I told them to write a eulogy of me, they're not going to know who I am. So their opinion is irrelevant. But the people that you love and the people's opinion you respect isn't. And so every night you put your head on the pillow and you go, today, have I behaved within the value system that I've created for myself? Well, of course you have to have one in the first place.
Yeah.
And then you can pull yourself back in.
Because I see it, Paul, and I do think it's a challenge, even with some of the people we work with, and I'm not perfect by a long shot, but I genuinely think, Paul, one of the reasons people are so unhealthy, whether it's physically, mentally, emotionally, is they will run through fucking fire for their business and for their clients and for other people, or maybe to uphold that reputation on social media for people that don't even fucking know them and certainly won't care when they turn that last page of their storybook. And I genuinely think a large part of the problem is they haven't done something like this.
I agree.
I think, and this might sound pretty brutal, and if this hits a nerve with you, I think it's a cue that you need to take action. We have people who inquire to work with us in Built to Last that you see on the application form, I want to be in great shape. I want to be healthy. Why? For my family, for my kids, blah, blah. It might sound nice, but do you actually believe it and be it?
Mm-hmm. Totally. And the thing about the purpose, you see, is we all know that you've got more chance of, we all know scientifically you've got more chance of succeeding at a goal if you have a deeper meaning and purpose behind the goal. That's my life goal. If we talk about yours for a second, being in shape. If you want to be in shape because you want to look good on holiday, it's not deep enough.
I've been there.
It's not going to work.
No.
If it genuinely, and this is why you've got to be honest with yourself in a mirror. If I look at mine, and I'm a consistent performer in the gym. I'm not a high performer. I'm a consistent performer. I've weighed the same weight now since I was 15. I'm 46.
Paul, been doing this for decades. If there's one that you're consistent as fuck, let's not sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
Right. To do that, you need to have had habits to keep you at that consistent weight.
Totally.
Right. And it's your state management and your behaviour that drives your habits. So let's just leave that one there.
And part of that, mate, is driven by insecurities. So the reality of it is it gives you a greater security, there's no doubt about it, if you're on holiday and you look better. By the way, every time I look at a mirror, I have a little glimpse, right? And I critique myself, right?
I do too, but for business owners and entrepreneurs listening to this, I'm sure there's a bigger reason of why you look after yourself, right? 100%. And it's related to this.
Of course it is, right? So the thing is this, control the controllables we mentioned earlier. If you can't control what's going to happen with your health, but you got to take the probability, gamble. It's the first part. If you want to be a good dad, you want to be as good a dad, a good husband, and a good family man for as long as you physically possibly can, right? So that comes with it. It's a non-negotiable, right? If you're serious about being a good dad, a good husband, a good family man, I could have added in brackets for as long as I physically possibly can, right? And so you got to look after yourself. But the second part, that is as I just touched on a second ago, the slightly more negative inbound, I'm trying to think of the exact, the insecurity is another thing that drives me on to get to the gym every day. I know, mate, if I go on holiday and I don't look how I want to look, I feel insecure, I feel moody, I'm not at my best, and they're the memories I want to make, mostly with my family and my kids. So I have to position myself, bear in mind, I have to sacrifice parent guilt feelings. I have to sacrifice to succeed. I have to be selfish to succeed. There's no option there. And my kids have to be a part of that sacrifice and selfishness. They're on the other end of that. So there's other parts, if I want to reach my goal, where it has to be all in. It has to be all them. And I have to be on holiday being the best version of myself. Because memories are what those kids are going to remember.
And how you feel on those memories is going to shape their memories. If they've got an unhappy dad, a moody dad, or someone that doesn't want to take a picture with their kids, that's a problem. And what baffles me, people pushing on in business, making the money, and I'm not patting that down, I'm trying to do the same thing, right? What are you doing it for? I want to do nice things, buy nice things, go to nice places. Okay, so there's a perception of a feeling you're going to get when you do those things or buy those things. But if you feel like shit, in that 5-star hotel, on that all-inclusive, whatever it is, how can you possibly enjoy that experience that you are working so hard and running above and beyond in business if when you actually get there, you're scared to take your top off? You
haven't got the energy.
You know what I mean? You haven't got the energy. Yeah, you probably self-sabotage with food at a buffet and then lie around feeling like shit around a pool. You don't want to run after your kids.
Totally.
Time and time again.
When we do the reflection sessions, when we go away once a year would be the standard. We do 2 or 3. You came to Krakow and Auschwitz. We did the Acropolis last year. We did Northern Lights. Unanimously, the thing that everybody falls down on and scores themselves low on every single year and feel bad about it, is how much time they give themselves in order to do the things like Built to Last, in order to train, in order to eat well, in order to create the good habits that allow them to create and feel good about the memories that they're sharing. And it is what it is, but it needs to change. You need to be aware of it, and then you need to change it. And that's what you need to do because, it's vital for my mental health. It's vital for my preparation for high performance. I feel like you need to be in good shape. I don't feel like if you eat crap and you sleep crap and you rehydrate crap, you're going to perform crap. You can pretend you're not, but it's impossible to do all the things scientifically, categorically that say you must have good sleep, you must eat well and not have moods and sugar crashes. You must have, exercise. You must have high energy. You must have all these things. Low caffeine, low alcohol. You have to have discipline and commitment, it all comes down to. You're not going to create the best memories or have the highest performance, full stop, if you're not going to look at that aspect of your life. And it's as simple as that. And if people disagree, up to them. As long as they've looked in the mirror, truthfully and genuinely, and they can disagree with that, fine. If they're pretending, you're just pretending.
I don't think there's many people who can look themselves in the mirror, out of shape, overweight. I genuinely don't think you can be as happy as what you say you are. I really don't.
And the thing is, it's not a criticism. Just start now.
Yeah.
Just start now. And you're the expert on this, but there's one word that I would describe more than anything, and it's consistency. The amount of people that beast themselves in the spirit of getting fit or getting healthy, and it just puts them off. Yeah. And they don't go back. Yeah. If you've seen my workouts, you'd laugh. You would. They're pathetic. But they're every day.
They're not, mate. You're in shape. So
they're every day for 30 years.
Okay.
Right? They're every day for 30 years. And when you see them, they're half an hour and they're turning up and I'm doing a bit. I'm ticking over. Right? I'm ticking over.
But you're never off it, Paul.
No.
You're never off it,
no.
mate. That beats the man who, I said this on your podcast, remember I came on your podcast, It beats the man who is perfect for a week, a month, 3 months if they're lucky, but then they go completely missing for the 9 months after that. You're the average of what you do, not what you do every now and then. I said it on your podcast, I say it again, Paul, even this year with with my own workouts, with adapting a dodgy hip, no cartilage, a baby on the way, business, travel. I haven't done a workout longer than 45 minutes this year.
If you want a good business, be consistent. If you want to get into healthy habits, be consistent. And I also think just start, forget this instant gratification culture we've got at the moment. Start with delayed expectancy of delayed gratification. Fuck it. Just do the right thing. Develop the right habits. Turn up every day. Be consistent. Don't expect anything instant. Don't even want anything instant. Don't want it. Ignore it. If you get it quick, move on. If you get quick money quick, watch how quickly it goes. It's the people that build and build and build and build and build. It's the people that do the things when nobody's watching. It's a good test of whether you're going to make it or not. What do you do when nobody's watching? I was seeing yesterday, Chris Eubank Jr. If he has said he's going to do 10 miles and he gets to 9 miles and there's no one in the gym and he pops his calf or he does whatever, he does 10 miles. Because then he knows when it gets hard in round 10 in the ring, he's not got the ability to be a quitter. It doesn't matter what happens. It does not matter what happens. You have to build those foundational wall of evidence habits that give you then self-belief and confidence, or at least allow you to trust the process when you lose self-belief and self-confidence, as we all do. We regain it and we lose it, we regain and we lose it. We have to sit in a framework of trusting the process, ignoring and not expecting instant gratification, and accepting it's going to be delayed gratification, and start now.
Amazing, mate. I knew the time would fly by. I mean, usually I wrap up one key lesson. Paul, you've answered my question. Where can people learn more about Sedulo, Be the Standard, and where can they find you?
Yeah, if you go, I mean, like I say, our business is for fast-growing advisory firms, for fast-growing organisations. I think we do it as good, if not better, than anyone else. I think it comes from a soul, and that's what we're creating. So you can go online, and we're pretty vocal as an advisory firm, so you won't miss us. And Be the Standard, we've got a London and 2 clubs in Manchester now. We've got some unbelievable speakers coming to all them sessions, some of them that I've spoken about on here. I think that's bethestandard.co.uk. And we've got some taster sessions coming up. And there you go, mate. It's all go.
Paul, mate, thank you so much. There's so much gold in that. And I encourage you to check out everything Paul does on his social media. And Paul, mate, it's an absolute pleasure to call you a friend. Honestly, I've been blessed to meet a lot of high performers and just good people doing good things for the right reasons. And I think today's podcast just reaffirms the amazing job you're doing, mate, in business. And I look up to you a lot, mate. And hopefully every single person listening to this show has took enormous value, not just in what you've achieved and what you said, but also how much you actually care. So
appreciate you having me on, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And guys, I'll see you next time.